Hello and welcome to the Airgun World podcast. I'm Matt Manning. With me today, I've got my co-host and Airgun Show wingman, Rich Saunders.
Morning,
and
everyone.
We also have a very special guest who needs no introduction, but he's going to get one anyway. It's Tony Belas from Daystate, BRK Brocock, MTC Optics. I think that's about all at the moment. And
not necessarily in order.
I was going to say, what he doesn't know about airgun development and the airgun industry probably isn't worth knowing. So, welcome, Tony. Just to kick off, I think very, very quickly. Now, obviously, I've been having a look through Airgun World magazine. So, Rich, I know that you have been trying out compact, folding, takedown airguns. Yeah. What else have you been up to in your airgun shooting life over the past week or two?
Well, like just about everyone else at the minute, Matt, all of my permissions are really flooded out. So anywhere that's got any high ground, especially if they've got outbuildings on them, is just full of rats. So I've been shooting loads of rats over the last, since I last came on the show. They've just started to dry out now, the permissions. So I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to get back on the rabbits fairly soon. In terms of testing stuff, yeah, the compacts and the small rifles was great, especially for shooting around the barns and what have you. But I'm looking now at some bolt action rifles, which is a whole lot of fun because they look they're kind of old school really, but I do love a bolt action. There's some really good bolt actions out there in the minority now.
It's quite funny that it wasn't very long ago we were getting very excited about bolt action airguns, and now they seem to be like the sort of traditional throwback type airgun.
Yeah, we don't have one anymore.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. They've all gone. Yeah.
Have you managed to get out on the range or do any shooting over the past week or two, Tony?
I have. We were out on Sunday. So we have a project here to get members of the staff shooting. So not necessarily everybody here shoots an air rifle, but we want them to. So those that, who've got an inkling to do it, we've an arrangement with Oak Shooting Ground, which is about 20 minutes from the factory. And I was down there on Sunday taking a couple of our lads through. And of course, they have to slum it with an alpha wolf, a ghost, and a red wolf. Just to introduce them into normal air gunning. And they were shooting those all day, and they had a great time.
For me, it's been the usual sort of winter ratting and grey squirrel control, and I don't want to let the cat out of the bag too much. But I've been doing a lot of testing over the last couple of months, trying to find a bait that has the same appeal to grey squirrels as peanuts, but costs less, because a lot of people say...
I was going to say, because I know that's a big expense, Yeah,
good luck with that.
We had a meeting on Thursday with a Staffordshire Red Squirrel group. So this is an initiative to bring red squirrels into Staffordshire. Now, we supported a red squirrel group in Cumbria. We supported one down in Devon, but we've never supported one in the middle of the country. We know we've got them up in Northumberland as well, and all these groups do a good job. But to have one sort of Cannock Chase, I think, is really where they're focusing on. So that was very interesting. So if you give me the question before time, I could have asked I think we had 8 people in the group. The office next door were very disappointed. They thought we were going to get 8 red squirrels in our meeting room downstairs.
I'm wondering how, because I'm familiar with I think it's the Cornwall Red Squirrel Trust.
That's right.
And they're in the Lizard, and obviously Northumbria is sort of right up kind of, but Staffordshire is right in the middle of the country. I'm just wondering how they're going to get like a
it kind of takes me back to my army days of strategy. If you're pushing up from from Land's End in an extended file, you've got a fighting chance. But if you are right in the middle, surrounded by everything, it's a big job. But I think they have to have, if they have open ground around them, then they basically create. I don't think they're allowed to lay mines, but they can have a sort of a mine area where they can keep
like a
them
firewall.
back. And I think that's how they do it.
Create a firewall. But I would imagine to do that, from what I've discovered over the past few weeks and months, they're getting through a lot of peanuts because, like I said, don't let the cat out of the bag too much, because I will write about it in Airgun World at some point. But everything else I've tried, even through using whole maize and flavouring it, it's got nothing like, so far, the appeal of peanuts. And I'm shooting in woods where I'm having to compete with the wheat that keepers are putting in hoppers for pheasants. And my last couple of outings, I've ended up leaving my bait stations and wandering around and shooting grey squirrels from the pheasant feeders, because they're choosing those in preference from the alternative offerings that I'm using, whereas previously with peanuts, those squirrels would be queuing up. Anyway, let's pick Tony's brains more about Daystate. Now, again, I've been flicking through Airgun World magazine. Obviously, Dave Barham has recently had his hands on the latest variant of the Alpha Wolf, which is the blue version. Tony, can you tell us a bit more about that gun from Daystate's point of view?
Yeah, I suppose so. I think if we can go back a little bit, we started with the electronic rifles in 2002. So by luck, really, we fell on an association with Steve Harper, who had been working on electronic air pistol and an air rifle since 1994. So he'd had a few years at it when we sort of tied up with him. And tying up with Steve Harper really gave us 10 years of development for free, and we were then able to progress the electronic Daystates from 2003 really onwards and upwards until the electronic designer David Snook, who was the genius behind it, unfortunately died about 5-6 years ago, at which point we went on our own. The last thing that David really did was Pulsar and Red Wolf Electronics, which was kind of the end of that era. But we'd had, 20 years of experience by that point, and we were able to pick it up. But picking it up, the designers didn't want to continue to work on the old school of design. They wanted to start afresh with a new set of electronics, new idea, new design studio, actually, because it had to be. And somebody once told me that electronic designers are of a time, and that usually is of their time, and a new electronic designer, he's working with a different criteria. So we moved forward and a new set of electronic designers, and we produced the Delta Wolf series of rifles. But as we all know, we launched that in February 2020. And we all know what happened in February 2020. Exactly. So we ended up having the German show, which we were due to launch or introduce the gun to the public, being cancelled with 2 weeks to go. And then Matt and I ended up in a studio in Bristol, didn't we? Having to do a very quick promotion video. I seem to remember I was writing the script and you were saying it. So it was
very seat of the pants. I mean, I'd literally just got my hands properly on the gun, and it was like, right, tell the world about it. It was exciting to say the least, but terrifying is probably a better choice of words.
We got it done, but we didn't even have all of the gun. Those of the people go back on that video notice that it never switched on, and there was a reason for that.
That's right, because it couldn't.
We hadn't got that far, but parts were all over the place. The guns were stuck in Germany. The couriers wouldn't travel because of COVID and wouldn't go across on the ferries. We had the backup models sent from Italy direct. And literally the day they arrived, the next day we were filming. So it was quite something. But eventually the world got going again. The designers went back to work, which was one of the problems is, you can't design stuff when everybody's sitting in their kitchens, So we got that going, got the gun out, got it, and really went through it. And it has developed into quite something else. And of course, now we've launched the Alpha Wolf version. I would like to say slightly more Daystatey than the Delta Wolf, which is kind of a tactical looking gun. The Alpha Wolf brings it back into the visuals of Daystate, and that gun is selling really well.
I think the main attraction for a lot of people is the programmability of the Alpha. What exactly can you program, and how would you go, for an idiot like me, how would you go about programming an air rifle?
Well, we did design it to be idiot proof, so it was designed to be touchscreen, color touchscreen, swipe. And really simple to use. I mean, it isn't difficult to program.
Those bits, if I think about the plugging into a computer, there's like another element of programmability capabilities.
Yes, I mean, I suppose if we've got it, we're going to boast about it. The plugging into the computer thing, it will do everything on the gun that it will do on the computer. But it's sometimes easier to see it on a computer screen, and you can also back up. And I think that's the big thing, is that you can. One of the worries is that you get a little bit lost in your programming, or when you've got it attached to a computer screen, then you can back up your start point.
Yeah.
And you can always restore it. So if you make a complete Horlicks of it because you've gone into advanced features and, got a little bit carried away, you can just reimpose it, which of course that's a feature of the computer. But otherwise it will do everything on the screen that it will do on the computer.
What is it that makes the electronic Daystate so special? Now, obviously that control and tunability is a big deal. But I think also what a lot of people overlook is the benefits of the electronic trigger. Because for me, as somebody who frequently shoots FAC, you kind of took for granted that as the power levels went up, the trigger started to feel lumpier and it started to feel quite agricultural. Then all of a sudden with the electronic Daystates, although I must confess the first time I used one, I felt completely out of control of it. It was Nigel Allen, former editor of Airgun magazine, who turned up on one of my permissions with a couple of, was it the Airwolf was what would have been my first experience of the electronic trigger?
Probably, yes. I think the Mark III and the Airwolf are the two first.
Right, yes. Well, I used the two Airwolves with Nigel. I was like, whoa, it's like black magic to keep it away. It feels strange. Then shortly after that, I got my hands on a Mark III. Giving it a chance, it just that trigger just clicked for me and felt incredible, to the point that everything else then felt wrong. But then pushing up the power levels, realizing that you could maintain that silky, crisp trigger action even at high power levels. And I think that gets overlooked a lot when people talk about the sort of tunability and everything else that you can do with the electronic Daystates.
Yes, I think that's right. I mean, one of the things we do go on about the programming and program facilities. Programming really, in a way, is unimportant, isn't it? It's bells and whistles. The thing about it is, the thing what makes the electronic air rifle better is lock time. So when I came from 2.2 rimfire to air rifle in indoor competition, it took about 2 weeks to get to air rifle from rimfire, because you had to relearn. And what you were relearning is the slow lock time. The time it takes for that pellet to come out of that muzzle, 3 times longer than a rimfire. So you've got that to learn. You've got to relearn the holding and breathing to compensate for that. And that is one of the disadvantages of an air rifle. It's why you can't shoot a moving target with an air rifle, why it takes a little bit to get to know them. On an electronic air rifle, the lock time is much quicker. And the instant pull of the electronic trigger is also, as well as feeling nice, it's fast. And that means you're less likely to pull off target, and it takes less time to learn it. It makes you a better shot, really. And I think that's probably the main advantage.
It was one of the first things that I noticed with that Mark III, actually, which was sub 12, and in fact still is sub 12, because I won't part with it. It's such a silky, fantastic example of what an airgun should do and should be. But that was one of the first things after the difference in the trigger, was how quickly pellets seem to be hitting the target relative to what I was doing at my end. And it almost does iron out the ability of the human frame to wobble and shift between you thinking you're going to touch off the trigger and the pellet leaving the gun.
I remember on the early Mark IIIs, we had the recoil characteristics a bit strange, and it had a tendency to feel like the target fell over and then the gun fired. It was, and it was a bit off-putting, because of the way that the hammer bounced after the rifle had been fired. It was a few milliseconds after the pellet had gone, and you'd get, you'd pull the trigger, the target would fall over, then you'd feel the recoil, and it was...
Yeah, the process was slightly backwards, Now, that's the electronic side of things, and there's a lot of synergy between BRK and Daystate, and obviously we've seen that the Ghost has inherited a lot of the Delta Wolf, Alpha Wolf features, and there is a new variant of the Ghost out now, isn't there? Can you tell us more about that one?
Well, not only can I tell you, I can show you, because I actually brought one in. Thought you might mention this. So there's the Ghost. The Ghost itself is a mechanical Alpha Wolf, really. And, the very first thing this rifle did was go off and win 2 world championships in bench rest. So to celebrate that, we did this version, which is the world record version. Paddy Cohen is the shooter, and he's a Lebanese shooter. So he put the Lebanese cedar on the side as a nod to him, as well as his name. And this is up to about 100 foot-pounds in 30 caliber rifle, 20 power adjustment. Of course, you can buy a 12 foot-pound one as well that still has the 20 power adjustment. It doesn't quite have the long 28-inch barrel. You can see that's because it's a bullpup style rifle. If that was a 28-inch barrel on a conventional rifle, I wouldn't be able to get it in the same room, would I? It would be hanging out the door. But the barrel starts here, at the back here, and then finishes all the way up there. So that's a long barrel.
Is the butt hook and the Arca, is that all part of the rifle, or those?
No, we put that on because that's the sort of thing that you would. But you do get this rather Gucci Arca and M-lock rail on the front coming with it, which is unique to this rifle. That adds a bit of front-end weight, which is exactly what you'd want on a bench-style rifle. That's the new one.
Yeah, good that we've moved into the BRK side of things, because someone who's been following you guys for quite a while, it does seem like Brocock BRK has kind of moved into a new phase of rifles. Forgive me for saying, but there was a time when they were kind of, middle of the road, nice and dependable. But the last, 2-3 years, you guys seem to have really upped your game, and there's been, 2 or 3 really good sort of upper end models that have come out. Is that a deliberate thing, or is that just the way things have evolved, or what?
It started off almost accidental. We bought Brocock in 2014, and we inherited a range of rifles from the original Brocock owners, and they were in factory in Redditch. And our initial idea was to continue to run Brocock at Redditch and the original range. And I think the planning concept was, we'll run it for a year, see how it goes. That'll give us a year to develop some new rifles, from our own source. Because the idea was to have a middle range rifle group, which wasn't Daystate. One of the problems you can do in manufacturing is you can do a thing it's called a line extension trap. You want to go low to get more sales and more volume, but you've got this high-end product. And if you go it's like Aston Martin doing a smart car. It doesn't do Aston Martin or the smart car any sort of benefit at all. It's called a line extension, and you cheapen one and you don't sell the other.
Yeah.
So we didn't want to do that. We wanted a brand that we could develop and do more turnover with parts, really, to get the economy of scale.
Uh-huh.
That didn't really work for 2 reasons. One is controlling a factory 2 hours away from the main factory, stretch resources. And the second one was that the build and design concept of Daystate had obviously over the years come to, that is not good enough, that can't go in our rifle. So when you started to try and say to engineers, right, that's acceptable, they'd come back with, no, it's not, and you've got nowhere to go. You can't argue with that. If it's either right or it's not right. And with an engineer, if it's not right, he doesn't want to put it in. And if you tell him to put it in, you are kind of discounting his view. And it was against the philosophy of Daystate to do anything sort of half-assed, really. So it had to be done right. So, and the guns that we were making weren't really intended for that. So when we started to develop the guns, they were making them to a Daystate quality and designing them to Daystate quality, perhaps with some ideas of faster assembly, to try and get the economy to keep the prices a little bit lower by a simpler assembly method. But every time they tried to simplify something, it caused a problem. So they brought back in another Daystate procedure to fix it. And gradually over the years, it's become just a Daystate with a Brocock name. So they started to diversify the design, so they were up there, but different enough from Daystate so that we weren't robbing from our own audience.
Yeah.
We probably are. Probably a lot of people buying the Ghost are people who have got Daystates as well or are a Daystate fan. But there is enough difference in the styling between the two.
More traditional rifle kind of sense.
More traditional rifle on Daystate, which we're kind of staying with and do well with. And whilst BRK, as it's now known, which is just a shortened name for Brocock, that is now going into this more modular tactical look, with less, only one wooden stock in the range, and that's a laminate, and to go along on that line. So that's really how it worked.
Yeah, because it seemed to kind of start this transition with, correct me if I'm wrong, but with the Ranger, and then that was followed by the Ghost and then the Pathfinder. I think I got that the right way round. And they seem to have been all seen, from people that I talk to anecdotally, anyone who's got one swears by it. And, I see comments on forums and things that people love the Ghost in particular.
Yeah, the rifle was there before. It just didn't get the recognition. And maybe we didn't catch the imagination with the earlier rifles, the Concept Light, the Bantam. But they were always there. They just didn't quite catch the market. But I think really from Ranger onwards, Ranger is an extreme rifle, isn't it? It's absolutely pared down to nothing. Yeah, it's an amazing backpack rifle, and we marked that way. And I think that caught the imagination. Obviously, for the overseas market, that a 35cc air tube. A lot of rifles have a secondary chamber bigger than that. So, it was too little for them. Still gave them 20-something foot-pounds, but they're used to a lot more. Yeah. So that we redid that with the Pathfinder and gave them 300cc, still with a 10-inch barrel, quite a small rifle. And then, of course, the Ghost, being a bullpup, is short, light, carbine, and has done amazingly well.
So, Tony, we are weeks away from the British Shooting Show. I know you guys are going to be there once again. What are you going to have on the stand? Are you going to be selling stuff? Is there anything new and shiny that's going to be put on display for the first time?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say, everybody, please come to the British Shooting Show. It's a premier show for British shooters, and if you can make it, you really should. We do need to have a popular and great show. It was a success last year, but you can never rest on your laurels, can you? You've got to, if people want want a premier show, then they have to turn up to it. But we had a great show last year. We had a new stand, which you were both on.
It was a great looking stand.
It was my home.
Yeah, you were there for all 3 days, weren't you? And I think, are you coming this year for 3 days as well?
I am.
Brilliant. Excellent.
I'm going to put my bag underneath your desk again, if that's okay.
Fantastic.
I saw Rich for a drink after the second day, and he'd obviously been working him really hard because he was just a shadow of his former self. Yeah.
Well, you tend to park somebody somewhere, so could you stand here?
Yeah.
And then you forget about them, and then you go 9 hours time. You go, oh, is he still there? But because you don't have a chance to look up yourself, so it's incredibly busy.
It was.
I've got to say, it's very rewarding on these stands. I do love them, because you see and speak to the most amazing people, don't you?
One of the great things about the British Shooting Show, as well as the kit, and we will get back to Rich's question in a moment about what people might see on the Daystate BRK MTC stand, but just catching up with people, touching base with other shooters, looking at what's going on in the British shooting world. The show serves that purpose so well, and if, to people that haven't been before, you'll be surprised at just how much there is to see there if you do get along. But sorry, Tony, what will we be seeing on yours?
When you're in a manufacturing position, you're hypercritical of what. Never mind people criticising us. The criticism here is internal. If there's anything not quite right, there's a big hoo-ha and song and dance and sometimes shaking the head. Can't we do it better? There's a lot of self-criticism in the company. And the comments that we get in from the public are generally negative comments because people are not really going to start ringing us and say, you're wonderful, you're fantastic. They're going to ring us and say, why is my breech O-ring gone? Or why is my gun leaking? Or why is my battery flat? And so we get a lot of that and we deal with it. But because we're seeing that and we're answering it and we're doing the best. But sometimes it leaves you with a feeling in the factory that Are we rubbish? Are we doing things right? And because we're always firefighting those sort of problems. Mm-hmm. So when you go to a show, a lot of the staff here think that they're just going to get inundated with people, complaining about this, that, and that. And that isn't what happens. You meet a lot of friends. You meet people who are very grateful to get the replies that you've got, and this is their chance to say thank you. And also you get this weird one where you carry on the conversation from the previous year. And some of these conversations go back 15, 20 years. And I've got one guy who turns up and we just carry on the conversation as if we hadn't had a 12-month break, and then he wanders off. And in 12 months' time, he comes back and we carry on. It's been going on for decades. And it's not just one. It happens on a few occasions at different places and different shows. I've got two guys from Scotland, Jamie and Robbie, and they come down. And I've been meeting them for nearly 30 years. We have no idea what each other does. We just carry on talking about air guns.
So Tony, I know you're going to have the world record ghost on the stand. I'm sure you're going to have that. Anything else new at all, or?
Well, of course, I can't tell you, can I?
I'm trying my hardest here.
We will have new stuff on there. I mean, obviously, we've just done a ghost, the new world record ghost. We did the silver ghost just before Christmas, so that'll be front and centre on the thing. And then Daystate hasn't really had anything much to show over the last since Alpha Wolf, really. Although the blue Alpha Wolf is pretty new, that'll be there.
And the blue Wolverine as well, I guess.
And the blue Wolverine, yes, the Sapphire, which is exclusive to the Airgun Centre, but we could still have one on the stand. But there will be other new stuff there. What we've done with the stand there, Matt, is we've the shop, which was facing out the other way at the show, the last two shows, we've turned it around and moved it back. So so now you have to come in one way. We had two ways of going in before, but some people coming to the shop didn't know that the guns were on the back, and people coming into the guns didn't know that there was a shop on the back. So we bit the bullet and turned it all in the same direction. And we've expanded the shop. We're launching a thing called a performance centre, where there's a lot more accessories available for Daystate and BRK. And that will be premiering on the shop where you can buy these accessories. People do want to come to these shows to buy. We are supporting at least 2 local retailers who are by the stand, who have rifles to buy, and we will have parts and accessories there for them to come and get.
Good. So, Tony, I want to take you back to the comment you made about customer service, because it doesn't seem, I hope I'm not talking out of turn here, but it seemed to be in the past, the thing that everyone wanted to moan about was Daystate customer service. Even people who didn't even own a Daystate seemed to moan about it. But now, the last few years, I seem to see more comments on forums praising you guys for excellent customer service. So I'm just curious, is that an evolution thing, or is that a result of a conscious decision?
Great change. So what we were trying to, back sort of 20 years ago, Daystate customer service was legendary good. It was known for it. And the reason for that was we sold about sort of 60 guns a month. And we would answer the phones. So people, and I remember it was cheaper in the afternoon than the morning, So we would answer the calls and we'd talk to people like you'd want to, People want to come and chat with me. I'm happy to chat with them. Problem is that we were picking off people one at a time. And that one person who'd spent 20 minutes with me getting an answer, by later as we moved on with, mobile phones and free minutes and worldwide sales, 30 people weren't able to get through while I'm making that one guy happy. And then it was 50 people, and then it was different time zones. And essentially, we were answering email and answering the phones. You just can't do it. You cannot do it. And make guns. You'd need 5 people with my knowledge on the phone. You can't just put somebody on the phone. They need to have barrel twist rates, pellet types, scope fitments, scope mounts. They've got to have the whole portfolio. Take about 10 years to learn everything. Just to answer phone calls on a day-to-day basis. And it's just not cost effective and doesn't work. So what we did was about 5 years ago, we decided, we had a meeting, we said, right, we're going to embrace social media. I was moved across to social media manager from what I was doing. And that's what I do now. And we produce social media posts. We have workshop guides where people can go on and see how to repair the gun themselves. If you're living in Alaska, you're not going to be on the phone to Daystate asking what O-ring to fit. So we've got workshop guides there. We've got a website where you can list in. We have technical help inquiries. But more importantly, it's the socials which has made the difference.
Yeah.
So I think it's 17 Facebook groups that we follow and support. Some we own, some we support, others we monitor. We monitor all of them. There's 3 BRK and the rest are Daystate. Anything from the ZAR Owners Group, great bunch of lads, to the Daystate Owners Club itself, and the Red Wolf Owners Club, the Alpha Wolf Owners Club. We support and monitor that, and they help, of course, by answering the basic questions themselves. But we can jump in and interfere if it looks like the advice is wrong or it's turning a little bit long-winded, So the guy's been trying to get an accuracy out of a Wolverine on the Wolverine Owners Group, and it's going on for 3 months. He's likely to get a message from us and say, look, let's get this fixed, because clearly your mood's not going to improve if we don't get it done. So we will do that, and we will jump in and we will collect rifles, and we will go after the problem more actively than we would have done when we were constantly answering the phone. I mustn't forget to mention the Airgun Support Pack. So about 6 years ago, we started a thing called the ASP, Airgun Support Pack, which was initially intended to support target shooters. Instead of people getting random sponsorship from Daystate or Brocock, they would get into a group of people they'd get their rifle, and, we'd keep them all corralled together. And they have morphed into really a technical support group. And they go out and they're on the forums and they're answering the questions. And I don't think we could do it without them, because they are picking up the problems. I'm getting, from Lee, Soren and the rest of the crew, feedback like, have you seen this one? Where did you find that? It's they're all over. I used to say with Soren, who's in Denmark, is one of our ISP, that if I logged on to Air Gunners of Bangladesh, he was already a member and been answering questions for 2 months. So they do a good job, and that helps as well. So the Airgun Support Pack is outward facing. They interact with the customers, and they are supported by us. And at the same time, we have another group called the kind of known as the Wolf Pack, but they're the accuracy research team, and they're inward facing. They're not allowed to talk to anybody. They do the development, and we don't like them talking to people. We don't want them to know what they're up to and what they've learned. So they will do the barrel testing, pellet testing, slug testing, and they will do programming. As we're changing programming, they will test that to make sure there are no glitches, or if there's a new trigger, they'll test that to make sure it's not going to fall apart, after the first year or something like that. So that's what they do.
So they're ironing stuff out before everybody else gets their hands on it. Basically, that's their
right.
role.
People do ask us, what do we do in development? And I think the art team is a big, and they're all over the world. I mean, you've got there's a journalist on it, Graham Webster, who's recently been moved across it. He's one of your writers, so he's on it as well. We've got these people all over the world doing this, not necessarily talking to each other as well. The Airgun Support Pack is a group together, all chatting, but the art team are not. They're very independent. They'll have a task to do. The 28-inch barrel, for instance, on the Ghost, that was developed in Lebanon. So that was done by Fadi Kouane and his friend, really away from the main group, and the others didn't have an idea. I think Soren did the 177 version of it, which hasn't come out yet, but that's another development because Denmark is a 177 country.
Right. Well, you've moved us along nicely with that, actually, because we need to move on to questions that we've had from listeners and viewers. And in fact, Pete Norris was going to ask about the ASP and ART, or ASP and ART teams. So you've done that one for us. Now we've got a question from Rob Bunn. Now, this question was to me, but I'm sure we'll all have a view on this. And it boils down to, how important is it to you to make use of edible quarry that you shoot? So people like me and Rich that are shooting usually primarily for pest control, but that will include shooting pigeons, rabbits, and even grey squirrels. How important is it to us to make use of them from an edible point of view? To me, absolute. One of the things that really appealed to me in my early days of airgun hunting was the sort of foraging and harvesting natural food, knowing where that food came from, knowing that it lived well, knowing that it died quickly and humanely, virtually zero food miles attached to it. So, yeah, I mean, although often these days to meet the demands of the general licenses, certainly when dealing with avian quarry or feathered pests, our primary purpose for killing them wouldn't necessarily be for the pot. But from my point of view, if something's edible, it's usually eaten in our house. And in fact, both of the books that I wrote years ago have sections on game prep and recipes. If we're overloaded with something, if there's an absolute glut, then it goes on to friends and outside family. And also, and I know Rich does the same, I've got a local birds of prey centre that will take anything that's not going to end up on our table. There are limits. I recall years ago an editor asked me if I would do a recipe using crow, and I drew a line at that. I wasn't going to serve up crows on the family meal table. But for me, if I can make use of anything I shoot, I will. And show videographer Nicky Brown does a lot of fly fishing. Squirrels that I shoot, he will have their tails far more than he can possibly use, but he'll pass tails on to other fly fishing friends of his that use them to tie fly hooks for trout. But Rich, presumably it's a similar story for you.
I obviously shoot a lot of pests. But yeah, I would struggle, I think, shooting something just for the sake of killing it. I don't think that's right to do. There always has to be a purpose to it. And in a pest control environment, a pest's impact on the environment that it's in, foodstuffs, human health in the case of rats, what have you, that's a justifiable reason. When it comes to rabbits, pigeons and squirrels, yes, they're pests, but they're also edible, so that's a reason for shooting them. I could never shoot something and throw it in a bush for a fox. So, yeah, we eat an awful lot of rabbit in particular. But to be honest, the freezer's full. Mum's freezer is full. My friend's freezer, there is more than we can possibly eat. And, if you did, you'd be sick of rabbits before too long. So, an awful lot of mine, go to a falconry centre to feed the hawks and the owls. So, I get a huge amount of pleasure out of knowing that I've not only done a good job for my landowners in terms of helping to control pests on their farm, but everything with a few exceptions, rats, corvids, what have you, that actually has an onward benefit. As I say, I couldn't shoot anything simply for the case of killing it. There has to be a point to it.
You've also got to think of the political side of it, haven't you? We want to keep this sport. Hunting is, it's difficult to assess what's being done with what, but it might be 45% of the UK market is hunting, maybe 40%, and it's down a little bit from the 60, which was a few years back. Still a massive part of it, and if you want to keep that part and not play into the into banning hunting with air rifles, low power air rifles, etc., then you have to act responsibly. I think this is why I'm interested in the grey squirrel conservation with red squirrel introduction, because you can't have a better flagship than the preservation of a domestic animal, which is being pushed out by an interloper, and that's a very good story. It doesn't come out enough. But when air gunners are involved in that, it's a hard one to argue against. Most people don't argue about shooting rats, but they can argue about rabbits, you see. So you have to be supporting a wildlife sanctuary with meat that must be ate, to keep birds of prey going, then They're not going to eat dog food, cat food. They're going to. They need
exactly, but also another great thing, because we're shooting them with air rifles and they tend to be headshot. I know that the Birds of Prey Centre that take squirrels from me love the fact, because they take the head off, they know there's no lead that's going to get to the bird, and on about defending what we do and why we do it. The ball is in our court completely. I mean, there are fewer flies on us than most people. A lot of aunties will have a pet cat that almost certainly kills dozens, if not hundreds of birds every year, very slowly, not for food. We as a community never pick up on that. It quite frustrates me, actually, that we aren't holding cat owners to task. They'll feed their cat meat that's produced to a miserable welfare standard that they never question. Yet here we are, we're improving habitat for native species, particularly when you're controlling grey squirrels. So we're improving things for native species. Plus we're eating healthy, humane meat that's had a great life and a swift death. And here we are having to answer to people that are trying to hold us to account. And I think if the shooting community just got its argument a bit straighter.
But it's almost impossible for a community of our size to get that message successfully across. The anti-hunting brigade is a lot more vocal, it's a lot larger, it's better supported. We don't have a chance. But we can act responsibly and not give that, and when it comes up, it's difficult to argue with the points that we're making.
That's why I think that the general license, I know there was a lot of confusion a little while ago with changes to the general license, but I think, the point of the general license is that you can't shoot something simply for being that thing.
Yes.
It has to be.
There has to be a reason, and you have to use alternative means before you.
The shooting community did itself no great favours when the general licenses were brought into the headlines a few years ago, because too many people in the shooting community revealed the fact that they didn't realise that those general licenses had been in place for decades. We've been reminded about them, and they were tightened up as a consequence.
Yeah, a lot of people kicking the can, going, "I don't want to be controlled. I don't want to be changed." Well, you were already. It just you didn't realise it. And the license, which weren't fit for purpose, were being tightened up, and people were just making a noise. But they will tend to do that if we had this with semi-automatic air guns a few years ago, but I want a semi-automatic. Well, you can't really have one.
I've got a question, Tony, that came into us from Tim Stanley. I'd like to know this as well. You've been around the airgun industry a long time. What are the things that really irritate you about air gunning, air gunners, airgun industry? What really kind of gets under your skin?
Well, everybody has their pet hates, don't they? For me, I think it's I've got one at the moment which is barrel twist rates. Okay, so in my world, when I was in the army for a long time, and we shot at Bisley, and we would shoot 1,000 meters and stuff like that. And these had things called spin drift and gyroscopic effect on bullets due to the curvature of the earth and the gravity, etc. But on an air gun shooting at 50 yards, you don't get spin drift, you don't get gravitational effect. You've got a shuttlecock, you're basically firing down the barrel. None of this really has an effect. The twist rate is really to tighten the group up, so there are different twists and different lands and grooves. And that's the accuracy research team are playing with different twists. Turns out that if you go a bit faster, you need a slightly faster twist, and a slower twist you need for a short airgun barrel, and they build that in. But it doesn't make any difference for any ballistic programs. You can put on that ballistic program 1 in 12 or 1 in 30. It's going to drop the pellet in exactly the same place. But I had one this morning that said, I'm confused. It says, you said my twist rate is 1 in 18, but it says online it's 1 in 17.7. Which is it? Do a bit of research. And also, if it's turning it's 1 inch, it's one turn in 17 inches. Not the hardest thing in the world to measure, is it? Put a pellet in, put a rod behind it, and see how long it takes to go round once. That's your twist rate. So I suppose those sort of questions do get me a little bit. And also the other one, which caliber is better? 177 or 22?
Yeah.
Will that question never end?
No, Never ever.
Yeah.
And
Which
I hope
one you
not as
like
well.
best? I'd say which
Oh,
one
right.
you like best is the best one. Very quick question, Tony, just to spring on you. What is your desert island air gun? It's a desert island where you've got a compressor and a very long extension lead reaching that desert island.
I'm glad I got a compressor because I couldn't handle a pump. Yeah.
So your desert island air gun.
I think it's still, for the moment, it's the Alpha Wolf. I've got a lot of people here who prefer Ghosts over Alpha Wolf, a lot of the factory shooters. And whenever I demonstrate guns, they tend to drift towards the Ghost more than the Alpha Wolf. But for me, the Alpha Wolf, because it's got that technology in it, and I've been brought up really with electronic air guns, and I hate to not have one. So I think that I would have to have an Alpha Wolf with me on that.
It's the Alpha Wolf.
Maybe the safari version, so I could go hunting.
Yeah. So a rugged-looking desert island appropriate
That's
Alpha
right.
Wolf.
Yeah.
Well, look, thank you ever so much. Just a bit of housekeeping for everybody that's tuned in. Firstly, thank you very much. But also, don't forget to pick up the latest issue of Airgun World magazine, or better still, take out a subscription. Then you'll get 13 issues a year delivered to your door. We do actually have an offer, 15% discount for podcast listeners and viewers. Now you need to go to airgunshooting.co.uk, and the discount code is AGWPOD24, but we will try to put in a link in the show description so that you can follow that. So Tony and Rich, once again, thank you ever so much. And for those of you who are tuning in, Dave Barham and Terry Doe will be back with another guest in 2 weeks' time. Thank you.